All right, welcome everyone to Angular Nation South Asia. So thankful for everyone to be here, and also super excited about hearing from Greg for the first time on this channel. It's gonna be so exciting. Yeah, as you can tell about the number of people who have turned up and who are excited about this talk, it's just drawn a lot of attention. So the floor is yours, Greg. Take it over. And you can share your slides or present the screen. I mean, anything. Yeah, big round of applause for her. Wait, I don't think we can hear you though. You're not muted. It just doesn't show. Maybe your headphones are. Still can hear you.
How about now? Is it better?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, sorry for that. All right. Hello, my name is Greg. I'm CTO in Cobiro. And today we're going to be talking more about the event-driven architecture. Is the concept that is pretty common on the back end, but the front end can also use that approach to build application. And today talk, I'm going to tailor around state management tool. And since a lot of people ask me about NGRX, this is why I'm going to talk about how to incorporate event-driven architecture in NGRX, but it can be used in NGXS and other state management tool that you're actually using. So am I okay to share my screen and go on? Cool. Let me do it. All right. Okay. So as I already introduced myself, let's get to the next point. So what you will learn today. Today, we're going to be discussing about coupling and cohesion, which are the core fundamental things in computer programming. And then I'm going to explain you what is event-driven architecture, EDA for short, and then what is it, how does it work, and what are the benefits of using EDA. So let's start with coupling and cohesion. Yes, I believe there is a question. I cannot, sorry.
Oh, just Connie. I think she's having some.
Okay. So just go on, right?
Yeah, go on.
Okay, cool. Okay, so coupling and cohesion. So these are the two very important concepts. So it took me about 10 years to actually get to it. You sort of like hear this all over the place, like, oh, loosely coupled components and so on. And that's true. But it really, like, no one even taught me, like, how do you actually check? Because it's measurable. You can measure how many coupling points you have in between the module and how much cohesion you have. So you probably heard about things like spaghetti code. And, like when you do the PR review of someone or someone does a PR review, you can hear some, like avoid spaghetti. It's like, yeah, sure, but what does it really mean? Like no one really tells you this. So here the mystery will be solved, hopefully, once for all. So let's start with coupling. So imagine the picture on the top is two different cubes, and the two cubes represent different modules. How can you think about this cube? What is a cube? Well, think about it as an NPM package, or think about it as a module, like an Angular module, but like a top module. It could be top folder, or if you use things like NX monorepo, that would be a library, for example. So, or like in normal Angular, the vanilla Angular, it would be like a project. So think about it like a library or a project. Library is a project, really. So it's a library inside the code base, right? So it's a bounded context approach to creating your folder structure. So the top root folder, and then each dot inside the cube would represent a class or a submodule, or like a concept inside the subfolder of that module, right? So here we have a 2 points, the 2 green dots. You can think about it as your index.ts file on top, like your public API, like a API that's facing outside. So something that gives access to your inner modules, right? And then what you would do normally, you would avoid giving access to all your submodules inside, because you want to create a loosely coupled modules. If you give access to everything in a module, you don't create any facade or any, any concept that controls what can be accessed in your modules, then you're going to end up with the picture in the bottom where submodules refer other submodules from another libraries, and that's a very bad thing. It's because it starts to create, well, spaghetti code and lasagna code. So generally, a common example would be if you want to move things around, it's going to be very hard because it creates the coupling points. And I know the IDEs these days can actually deal with a lot of this stuff for you. But, it really also goes against this approach of layered architecture in which, each layer should communicate with another layer and don't skip layers around, and definitely not include another layers from another modules. It creates a lot of troubles. Especially when the code base grows, you have to be mindful of it. So now another tip I'm going to give you that I never gave before is how do you actually know that you have a coupling? Well, in TypeScript, it's very, very easy but effective way to do it. Well, you just go in and look at the import of your top file. So you go on top of your file, a TypeScript file where you have a component, a directive, or whatever, and then you look at the imports on top. And then you see, what do you see there, right? Do you see imports from another modules? Well, that's coupling. So avoid that at all costs using your index.ts file, right? And then here we have an example of loosely coupled high cohesion, because loosely coupled means I have only one connection point in between the modules, and that's generally good. Ideally, you would not couple anything in between the module. You would create like a proxy module for events and stuff. I'm going to talk about it in a second. And then you would have a cohesion problem. A cohesion is how things structure inside the module. So think about it that, the more connection points you have, and obviously this needs to be very thought through. So ideally you would create a layered architecture that, let's say, an application layer would know only about the domain layer. Then the domain layer wouldn't know about anything else because it's the domain of your problem. And then you would have infrastructure layer that would know about, external connection like RESTful API. It would have maybe some clients. So you would never really include a HTTP client in your component, for example, because a component is in the UI layer. So a UI layer should not know about HTTP because you skip the application and you skip the infrastructure layer, right? So technically you want to, obviously, how many layers you have in a code is a separation of concerns. So you would make sure you don't want to jump in between those, and like UI layer shouldn't know how we fetch the data, and how we fetch the data shouldn't know about, some UI stuff. So the benefit of that is higher mobility, replaceability. You can just replace those layers. So given an example, UI today could be a component, but tomorrow you want to change it maybe for resolver in your route. And then you want to dispatch some actions or calls, not only from the components, but also from other things like resolver, for example. So that way, these two are sort of in the same layer. So these can access your APIs, your application commands or application actions on your store and stuff, but you shouldn't do it in other layers. I hope it makes sense. It will make more sense when we go down. So generally, keep your layers clean, keep the architecture inside the module clean. You can use ESLint for that. There are some pretty good libraries that help you actually look at the imports on top of your file and then just keep it clean as much as possible, meaning one layer can access other layer, and try not to do the cyclic dependency when each layers depend on each other. That's also an anti-pattern. But given you keep that clean, the amount of connection inside foster reusability of your modules. So that's pretty cool. And then reduce the amounts of points in between the modules. That's coupling. So loosely coupled high cohesion. This is what you want to go for. Okay, so what are the issues related to not following those rules? So one of it is spaghetti code. So spaghetti code means you reference everything everywhere, And that way, it makes it very hard to refactor, because changing in one place creates a break-in in other places. And it also creates things like cognitive load. Now you have to understand so many things about your code, not only your module, but you also have to understand the public interfaces of the other module, and they are pretty big. And those modules can reference another modules. So it becomes this huge cognitive load for the developer, and then your business comes in and say, hey, like, why did you break that stuff? Well, you say you didn't. Well, technically you didn't, but the system is fragile. So in another part of the system, something got broken because you changed the API, but you couldn't know about it, right? But because everything is intertangled and connected, those issues arise. So the fragility is just what I mentioned. Change it in one place, break the other things. Then there is also maintainability issue. So, it's much harder to maintain a bigger code base. So you cannot just upgrade easily the architecture inside the modules, because it's all tangled together. So, if you move things around in the subfolders, things starts to break. So maintainability is much higher. And then obviously, as cognitive load grows, there is also higher complexity of the whole situation. So you start avoiding things like polymorphism in your programming, you start ignoring solid rules, and you actually start putting ifs in between the places. And every if statement is a higher complexity. Ideally, you would reduce that to about 2 score. So like having maximum 1 if in a function. If you have multiple ifs in a function, that's very complex code. So it means it's much harder to test. It's much harder to cover all those edge cases, because you should not only cover the if case, but also the else cases and so on. And even not only maintainability of the code is higher, but now maintainability of the tests are also higher. So I have this simple web shop. So an idea is it's an open source software, so you can go ahead and download it. There's not many things like this. So let me navigate and show it to you. So in general, what are we dealing with? So EDA is event-driven architecture. An idea is, this is an example. So let me show you an example. So we go to EDA and we go to projects. And then you have a version for for NGRX and classic Angular. So let me start with a classic one. So this is a categories project. So think about it. This is like a typical, very basic e-commerce application. You have modules like categories, events, notifications, products, and settings. So generally, think about it this way. Notification is like this core service that needs to send a notification whenever something happens. So let's have a look at it. I will show you the code so you can actually get more hands-on on this. Okay, so here is a single file where I have already template prepared and stuff. So you see, I look at the top and it looks pretty clean. I mean, I know only about the notification service, which is the infrastructure layer. And in my UI layer, I don't have an application layer, so that's fine. And then look at this. I only have a notification service reference to it. Sounds good, right? No coupling, good cohesion, pretty good. So let's look at other things that can actually make things a little bit more interesting. So imagine a business comes in and says, hey, I would like you to notify user whenever a category was selected. So here we go. I have a constructor and I have category service, same as before. But here, look what I have. I have notification service. So notification service doesn't know it's being used by other places, but category service is dependent on notification service. You can look at it here. And look how many subfolders I have to go through. Obviously, I could make it a separate lib, and then that would be more visible with the @ symbol before. But generally, think about it this way. This notification service is being used in categories component, which means that whenever I change any of this signature, I don't only change it there. I have to come and change it all wherever I invoke that method. So that's coupling 1, right? But then let's go to the next example, and I go to products. So let's say I have also this requirement that will say that whenever a product is added, then I want to notify. Then I want to notify the user about it as well. So you see, here is a second coupling. So everything looked pretty good. I had my product service, but the product service is this like this mod. The product module is this module that makes things coupling with everything around. So look, product service knows about product module knows about the product service. It's internal, so that's pretty cool. But then it also knows about the category service, and it also knows about the settings service, and it also knows about notification service. So we know everything around many things in our system. So this is a pain point. This is the module that everyone should be scared of changing, because when you change something here, it can affect all over the place. And then even worse, if someone changed the notification service, I will have to go and change it. If someone changed the category service, I will have to go and change it. So this is a classic example of spaghetti code. You can have a look here. Let's imagine that all services they are placed in the infrastructure layer. So what do we have? We have a reference to another module. It's infrastructure layer. So I am in UI layer of my products module, and I know about the infrastructure layer in my categories module. I also know about the settings module and its infrastructure layer. And I also know about the notification module and my infrastructure layer. So technically, I have all spaghetti I need. What would be even worse if category service would know about my components and stuff like that? That would be even worse. But generally, I hope you see the drill. So this is not optimal. This is, even though the code looks pretty decent. I mean, you look at it the first time and say, okay, 70 lines of code, that's not very far. You have some observables around, and you have async pipes. So yeah, things are good, right? But now they're not good. So whenever you analyze from architectural perspective, not technical architecture, but like, communication in between the modules, you always have to go here on top of your file and analyze those. That's the first thing. And then when you analyze those, you can say, if the architecture is sound or not, even though technically here on the PR would look nice, but when you check the PRs, always pay attention to your imports as well. Obviously, when you use NX, it's great to use, things like dependency graph that will help you a lot. And coming back to my presentation, let me see. This is a dependency graph generated from NX. Obviously, this is an example for NGRX, but it's pretty much the same. So, sorry. Actually, it's slightly changed, but generally the dependency graph looks like this, where things can point out. So what you want to avoid when you look at the dependency graph, first of all, how many connections come from one place? This is a slightly different example because I changed the code for the NGRX. You can see it in the repo. But generally, if you have more than one point coming from a service, from a module, that could be a yellow light for you to actually, maybe I can reduce those points, right? Another thing, unless it's like a core, like context of user is pretty shared everywhere. Then also the other thing you want to look is the pointing, the wedge of the arrow. If the wedge is going both ways, that's a no-no situation as well. Luckily, it's not the case here. So how event-driven architecture can help you with it? So first of all, a lot of people ask me, why not to use state management system? And the answer is, you should use state management system, whether it's based on your subjects or on RxJS, or whether it's NGXS, NGRX, whatever, doesn't matter. The point is, the state management system is technical architecture of your module. You decide to use it there. Obviously, you can have it like all over your application, but generally, it doesn't affect event-driven architecture. You have to think about event-driven architecture as architecture that is based on events, and it helps you to manage strategic framework. What does it mean? It means it doesn't matter if you use NGRX or whatever, it matters that how you communicate in between the modules. So the goal of event-driven architecture is to reduce the coupling points of your inside in your whole application between the modules. So also one thing to really bear in mind, and that can be slightly difficult at first, is that events are asynchronous in nature, which means things will not happen instantly. It's not like you invoke things. You have to change from this command-based approach. In command-based approach, you dispatch an action. You click a button. You invoke a method call somewhere, and this is command-based. It means I click here and it affects something else. In events, it's different. You have to think not what I want to do, but you want to communicate what has happened. So you want to say, hey, I want to tell my system that user got logged in, for example, and that will affect so many modules, because now I can have all my user email. Now I have some IDs around. Now I can fetch products. I can fetch categories. I can do so many things with this one event. And it's also very important that you think about events that they are multicasting. This is very powerful. So events are really all kinds of connection you can imagine. It can be one-to-one. It means one module communicates a change and only one module reads it. That's fine. It can be one-to-many, means one module communicates something and many modules react to that change. That's also very common. And it can be many-to-many and many-to-one. But idea is like this. So one module that is listening to the change can listen to not only one event, but can listen to multiple events. I can give you an example. Maybe you would like to listen to things. Maybe you want to maybe you want to load categories and products separately. Maybe they are not tightly coupled together, so you can load them by user ID. So you want to load a categories, and in the same time, the module of products can actually, hit the backend and fetch the products. Now, when do you actually show your UI? When do you stop showing the spinner? Well, when both are happening. So you want to listen to both types of event. One will be products loaded, for example, and the other will be categories loaded. So you can apply things like we call it orchestration strategies, but it's pretty much NGRX operators. So you can use combine all, zip, all kinds of operators that actually join multiple streams, because events are really streams. Okay, so here is an example. I have these three modules: products, categories, and notifications. So you see, ideally, they would not know about each other. So how do we communicate information? Well, you need an application service that is not part of your libraries, it's part of your application logic, and it's called event bus. So event bus will wrap around all the modules that happen in your application. It will not directly know about each of these modules, but it will have two things that will expose. One will be a dispatcher. So NGRX can dispatch an event, and event bus will pick it up. And then it will also know about the handlers. So the handlers, the event bus will map the handlers with the event type. And then if I want, for example, here I want to say category deleted, for example, then I will have a handler in the notification for the category deleted event. And in the products, I will also have category deleted event. And then in notification, I can show, hey, category got deleted. And then in the products, I can now delete all the products, or maybe mark them deleted, or maybe hide them, or do whatever I want to do. Okay, So let's have a look at the code. So let's move towards the. Okay, so code is slightly changed, and let's get into it. So have a look. What happens is, you see, if you look in here, I will have a reference to my store because it's a slightly different thing, and then I dispatch an action, and then how do you actually? Sorry. Oops. Oh, here we go. Here's an example of an event handler. So when the product was added or category was selected, I have this event handler, and then the event handler will be notified. So the method handle will be called when the category selected event will appear, and that will dispatch an action on the store, right? So in here, I can specify an event class. It could be an array. So then it's going to be event classes, and then it will be an array of events. So this is how we handle. The handling when the event happens. And then let me find it. So in the products.
Greg, that has a tip for you. If you press dot, it opens the repo in VS Code, and it's just easy to navigate.
Could you please say again?
You could read Aditya's helpful tip for you in the chat. But basically, if you press dot, it opens the repo in VS Code, and it's just helpful to navigate.
When I press the dot right here, yeah. Sorry. Where do I press the dot?
I have not seen this before. If this works, I'm going to get all excited.
I don't
know what they're talking about either, Greg.
I know you can change the URL here, and I think you can also load it in the Stackblaze, right?
Aditya, replace .com with .dev, he says.
Okay.
Are you making this up, Aditya?
No, I heard about it.
You can actually do that. I mean, you just click dot or period on the repository, and it opens up the web version of VS Code.
Just a second.
Yeah, I've tried that, so he's not lying.
Just a second. I need to get the authentication.
I'm sorry, Greg. We just hijacked your talk.
No, come on. It's a great tip.
I was like, if this actually works, it's going to be really cool. I didn't know about this.
The teaching works two way around. Like you teach us a lot of things.
Right?
Oh yeah. By the way, guys,
and it worked.
It works. It's awesome.
Holy cow.
Yeah. It's awesome. Thank you.
Wow.
Yeah. But by the way, I actually moved into VS Code. It's so much better. I started to play with the extensions. Some cool stuff coming up, guys. Very, very shortly. How to
I just
automate.
saw that on your Twitter, and I sent you a link to Angular Africa. Did you see that? We had Rob and Oye and Val in there talking about. Yeah, cool. Anyway, okay, we're gonna go back on mute and let you go back to your. That was cool.
Thank you. All right. Where were we? Let me see. I believe there is an effect. Yeah, and inside the effect, what you can do is to dispatch an action, right? And then you can move even further and start to abstract this away if you want to go with hexagonal architecture, but that's a whole another talk. But yeah, this is how you dispatch. And now when you look at the top, yeah, sure, you know about another module, but that module is special. It's not normal module. It's not a full feature thing. It is an event module. So this is an application concept that is okay to link. It's like routing. Think about it. Like, how can you create an app without having a common route shared between the modules? I mean, you can't. It needs to work. There needs to be this single core modules on the application level where you can actually manage things. So think about events like routing. That's the easiest thing to think about it. Okay. So I know you guys will have questions. We'll have a bit of a time just in a second. So let me do a bit of a sum up. So this is what I was talking about. So all these modules know about the events, and it can seem a bit anti-patterny, if there is a word for that, but it is not really, because imagine there is a thick line in here which says this is libraries and this is application. You know, it's like you just know about they need to know about the events, and that's totally fine. You know, this is the only coupling point. But of course, changing anything in events has a pretty dramatic effect on your application, so you gotta be careful with that. But once you understand you know what is where, it will get very easy for you. Okay, so let's get to the rules. There are some rules, or good case practices, or things that really worked out for us while we worked for about a year with this framework. So one thing is, events must not depend on other modules. Ideally, even better is if libraries don't know about anything else. Unless it's like a core library, okay, this is an exception. But in general, they shouldn't know about other feature libraries. Another thing is kiss your events, which means keep them stupid simple. Don't put any logic in the events. Events are just DTOs, data transfer objects that transfer data. And because we do some type checking on the class level, we have to keep them as classes, but ideally they would be just interfaces. And then send only one event from each function. So when you saw this effect that I was dispatching, very often people will say, oh, so you have to notify a notification service and you have to notify a category service. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna send two events, one for categories and one for notification. But that's not how events work. This is how commands work. But how events work, you only send one level, because so one event, because that event communicates what has happened in your module. It doesn't communicate what you want to do with it. You let the rest handle it. And it's really powerful, because if you want to decide to shut down one module, or maybe hide it behind a feature flag, or maybe totally erase it from your code base because your business doesn't need it anymore, then you can do it, because the handler will not handle that event, and that's totally fine. And it also helps you with lockability and so on. Then another thing is send only one event from each, keep all your events in events library. But that I already discussed that. And then, okay, what are the benefits? So here we go. There are many types of benefits, actually, that can convince different people. So how do you convince your colleagues about using it? Well, you tell them about architectural benefits. One of it is that it's scalable. Why is it scalable? Well, because you don't have coupling, so you can, and you scale horizontally, which means you can add multiple libraries that rely on the same event, and it will not cause you more issues with maintainability and so on. You can just scale it. You can add as many libraries as you want. Another thing is maintainability. It's much easier to maintain, because now you can have a whole team working on a specific library and the other team working on another one, and they just have to agree on the event, what kind of data you put in there. That's it. That's the only contract you send. Another thing is lockability. You know, in the event bus, you can add a logger and whatever logger software you use, even console log, and then you can see what is happening. So you can literally build a whole timeline and see how your users use this software, and when the bug happens, exactly at what point. You don't get the random line number. What caused that problem in terms of like what was executed and what was the action before that could corrupt your data. And then also testability, that's really great, because now you don't have to worry about your test beds being very big, because you don't have those coupling. All you can do is to stub out your application bus. We already have a application testing module for this as well. And then you can just provide it, and then you can listen if the event was invoked with specific data, or you can also dispatch events being handled when you want to test your handlers. But it's really great, because now you can focus on testing your business logic and not create a very complex test beds around it. So that's pretty powerful. And then another thing for you as a developer, I really think you should worry about your developer experience, DevX. So you will have a lower cognitive load. You don't have to worry about so many things. So you can do, you can go more in depth with the coding of specific module. You will gain architectural freedom. You still want to pass data around, but you don't want to maybe marry a state management system. Maybe all you do is a CRUD application, like a back office or something. You don't need to follow the state management system if you don't have to. You can decide on service component architecture. Or maybe you need the state management system, but in some other module. You don't have to worry about it because the only thing in common is the event bus, and it's pretty agnostic to the architecture you chose inside the library. And then obviously easier debugging due to lockability. Sorry. And then the benefits for the business. So your boss might still be a little bit reluctant to try new things out, but then you can say, hey, user actions attract over time. Wouldn't it be great if you can actually understand what were your users doing before taking a specific action, or what was the next action they did after purchasing your product? That is great feedback, and you can't get it if you just have a snapshot of your data, because snapshot is only the current state, the end state. Imagine a situation. For example, we build a website builder, right? And we have this common example. We had the situation when people will have thousands of events, and then we would come on a website that they created because we wanted to debug some issue for them, and then we see it's empty. And we're like, okay, that's a very weird state. Like, why is it empty and it has thousands of events? And then we see it's because the last 4 events that they did was deleting the website. So actually, but we could still see what was the before action they took, and then we could identify the issues, identify the business opportunities for the user, and it really drives our product to another level. Then another thing is you can experiment with the flow, Maybe you want to add that module that will, I don't know, pop up something on your screen, or maybe not. Maybe you want to A/B test it. So it's easy now because, these loosely coupled, you can just add things or remove, and it doesn't affect that the system gets broken. And then obviously it makes your feature flags go much easier. Okay, so let me sum up before we get to the QA part. So what we have learned, hopefully by now, how to identify tight coupling, maybe not necessarily in NGRX, but in general in Angular code. Then what are components of IDA? We talked about event bus as a medium of communication. We talk about events, which are the data transfer objects that communicate what has happened in a specific module to the outside world. We talked about the event dispatcher that allows us to dispatch an event and deliver it on event bus. And we also learned about the event handler that listens to the events on event bus and can execute an action inside. And then I showed you with the great tip how to implement IDA in Angular project, and showed you with VS Code in the browser. And then what are the benefits of IDA? And that's it. Really, thank you. I don't have my Twitter here. I'm not so big on it, but it's starting. If you want to get in touch with me, you can try all kinds of mediums, or whether YouTube or Twitter. So I hope you learned something, and maybe let's get to the questions.
Thank you so much, Greg. Before we get to the questions, I just want to mention real quick that thank you everyone for joining us today. We have a lot of people who showed up for this, and I'm guessing they're all fans of you, Greg, because you had the power to pull them out from wherever they were all over the world and come join us. And I would also really be grateful to everyone if you could join the South Asia channel. That's where all the magic happens. The South Asia and the APAC channel, every Wednesday we meet at the same time. I'm only saying this because I noticed that a lot of people who joined today were not really in either of these channels. So yeah, I mean, join our channel.
Yeah, who is that Agent RR guy? He looks really suspicious. I think he's an imposter.
Yeah, I almost blocked him. Just kidding. Greg, he's a resident member. We're just pulling his leg. Don't worry, you don't have a stalker here.
No worries.
I know. Sorry I was late to this meeting. I wanted to be here, but I have a release, so.
Yeah,
That just makes it
worry.
even more suspicious.
Yeah.
Luckily, it's recorded. It was a really cool talk.
I hope it's not a Big Bang event in your company. I hope you deliver smoothly.
Actually, this is a big deal. This is the last release of the year, so we have a lot of changes and a lot of defects that we fixed. So, yeah.
It's even more cool that you were able to hang out with us still. And the other quick thing that I wanted to mention was this is going to be the second last event for this year. We have another one scheduled for December 8th. And then I'm just pausing on making any more or having any more, hosting anything more on this channel for the next week for December, which is like ideally only 1 week, but it's also holiday season. And I strongly believe that everyone should take time to recharge, reconnect with their families, don't burn out. I know like a lot of companies have big releases coming just to like push one last thing before the year closes. So I myself practice taking time off as much as I can. And I really want to encourage everyone to do that. Yeah.
If you missed the channel, you can go check out the YouTube channel too, because we have a lot of, because I actually took some time off in October and I missed a whole bunch of things that I was bummed about. There were some really good speakers that I really wanted to see and I missed them. And so I've actually been going back and catching up on the YouTube channel. So, so we'll never actually be alone.
Yeah. And we also have our Twitter account where, although I will be taking break off from it as much as I can, but I also keep sharing things that I'm like, oh my God, everyone should know about this. This is so cool. Keep sharing things over there also. A lot of them are about Storybook, which Kai has a channel that he, for Storybook, especially on Angular Nation. And I also recommend everyone join it and learn Storybook if you already don't know about it. I highly support it, promote it, love it, everything. And,
hey, speaking of Storybook, we have do you have time for Kai to give us a little pitch, because he's got an event coming up in what, an hour, like today, in an hour?
Yeah, if Kai, you can make it quick, because I'm sure people have a lot of questions for Greg also. But yeah.
Yeah, I can make it very short. We talk about a new feature in Storybook, interactive stories beta, and we even have a guest talk, Jan Braga, and it's going to be amazing. I hope I can. I see a lot of faces from here, from this meeting.
We love Storybook. We use it all the time, so it's pretty awesome.
Sounds great.
Yay!
All right. I know Mario has raised his hand. Go ahead with the question.
Hey, Matteo.
Thank you. Hey, Greg. Nice talk. Thank you very much. I was anxious to hear about this because architecture is my passion too. And yeah, it seems that I feel the pros and cons of many approaches. And in this case, I was thinking about the deployment, like automatization and CI. If you decouple the architecture like that much, but you don't deploy only the product service or only the category service, like in some way, it is hard to trigger like the deployment of the applications relying on them, right? So how do you solve that?
Yeah, great question. So we don't deploy separately. So it sort of touches upon the micro frontends approach, right? Where you can have a separate micro frontends on your web, and then micro frontends don't really want you to have a lot of chat communication between the module. They want to say that's the module; it doesn't talk to anything. So you see, the event-driven. I had this whole discussion with Manfred Steyer about it, and generally. There is a way with module federation to do it, but it's not recommended. So I would stick with like NX and just deploy, whole application at once. But to answer your question, I think more importantly is that you would have then, if you want to deploy independently, you want to make sure that all the events and all the stuff is in the core. So whenever you change that, you actually redeploy all the other applications with it, right? So you don't want to have this situation in your application when things are out of sync. And the out of sync is the very hard problem to solve in events, because think about it, integration testing, right? So when I have my module and it talks to external API, you need to use some sort of tool to actually test that. So you want to have a contract with your application and the API. We're using Pact for that. And then you want to keep it in sync. The same is with events. Events need to be also integration tested. So on your CI, instead of just running your unit testing, it's good to actually create integration testing. You can use Cypress for this. You don't have to, create everything you could. That would be very pro if you actually have, a stub module, and then you see if I dispatch this, then that should be received, and so on. That's really great. But you can also use Cypress. So, clicking around will actually make sure things are integrated with each other. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thanks. It's hard to figure out how to deploy micro frontends or just a single application if you change some small module in the architecture that doesn't trigger the dependency tree. Yeah, you need to deploy like the whole application, right?
Mm-hmm. So changing events is a big thing actually in terms of deployment, right? But everything else is not that bad.
Thank you.
We have 5 more minutes if anyone has any questions.
Come on, guys. Please ask. What did you understand out of it? Maybe that could be also a thing.
I was just very amazed by the very first slide that you had that showed coupling versus loose coupling, tight cohesion. I'm saying that wrong. Yeah. I always have to think for a second between those two words.
No worries.
Everyone has been talking about it for so long, but no one really shows you an image like that stays with you and makes you understand it better. So that was pretty neat.
Samantha would approve.
Yeah.
Greg, I don't know if you know anything about my daughter, but my daughter, I was teaching her Angular, and we found out she was dyslexic. And so she really is very big into teaching with visuals. Okay. And that's a big thing that she's very passionate about. And she actually got into 3D animation, and we teach together with tons of visuals. So that's why I was like, all right, he's cool. Yeah, he's got some pretty good visuals. Okay. Because especially, once you've been doing architecture for a decade, then you understand these things because you see them over and over and over again. But if you haven't seen them over and over and over again, it's really hard to visualize like abstract things like architecture, especially scalable. So it's really cool, I think, to have that. I especially like that first. I took a screenshot and tweeted it because I thought it was really good. I think the visuals are very helpful. And the CQRS, I think, also under the hood, because I think it's really interesting that you had CQRS in your slides. CQRS or CRQS? It's CQRS.
CQRS, Command Query Responsibility Segregation. Yeah, so actually IDA started with CQRS, to be honest. So it was a funny thing because we've been building this website builder, and it was purely task-based UI. So, you could have a button like somewhere really far away from your canvas, and that would affect your canvas. And coupling that would have been impossible. So this is
why. Yeah? Sorry, go ahead.
No, this is why I came up with this thing like, hey, why don't we just dispatch it? And, NGXS would be great for this. But then I was like, every effect will actually affect so many things that it will be unmaintainable, and that was the problem I couldn't solve. So this is when we were like, okay, we started with CQRS, with query and command part. And we're like, yeah, it's really not like that. It's really different module connected with a bus. And that's 1 year of my research in Cobiro. and then here we go. IDA, just use it. I'm telling you, 1 year saved.
Yeah, the reason why that this jumped out at me was because I was working with Austin McDaniel when he wrote NGXS originally, and he was explaining to him because we were using NGRX at the time in this big company that we were working in, and it was just it was a lot of boilerplate. But when he went and started writing his own state management library, which I thought he was nuts. I was like, what are you doing writing your own state management library? But what he did was, because NGRX, as we know, is written on Redux. And he said, but Redux is like a React kind of thing. And so he said CQRS, it actually works better under the hood with Angular. And that's what he used for when he was writing NGXS. So that's why I was saying, I think that what you're talking about would really work nicely with NGXS. And beyond that, I would love to see you actually collaborating with those guys. So that's why I'm going to, right after this, I'm going to send you a link and introduce you to them, because there's a lot of similarity. And if you're working on something and they're working on something and there's so much overlap, it's really nice to bring people together and be like, you guys need to talk to each other.
Actually, we use NGXS first, and I'm a fan. I listen to a lot of podcasts. Like I like the principles they go with TDD and so on. I'm really impressed. I would love that. I would be honored.
All right. So Mateus Carniato and Mark Whitfield, you are hereby summoned to meet Greg Radzio. I'm gonna send them a message and tell them that they should talk to you and you should hang out with them, because they're really cool guys. And also, there's an NGXS Slack channel where you can go. And we have them sometimes. I think they were on Angular APAC. Just Mark Whitfield, like just a week. You guys like just missed each other, man. But we'll make that connection for sure.
Awesome.
Cool. This was fun. Oh, we're at the top of the hour.
All right. Well, guys, thank you all. It was amazing. I mean, first of all, I really love Angular Nation. I have to say, guys, what you do it's something I've been looking for. Like someone recommended me. I was like, I never heard of it. Yeah. And then I comment like, wow, that's like the best thing. You can come in and listen to Igor Minar and the other guys from Angular team talking. Like you really feel close and proximate to these people. I think the amazing work done. Really, really great.
This is exactly what it's here for. So yeah, thank you for saying so.
Yeah, thanks, Bonnie, for making Angular Nation feel like home for everyone.
And I didn't do it by myself, Ankita. It's you too. You and Kai and Connie and all the channel hosts. It's not just me. I just started it, but all of us. It's kind of grown into a thing. I love the just people are so supportive and so friendly and nice. And it's not about, it's really the imposter syndrome. I think it helps when everybody's just super, super nice. And it's like, you don't have to, like, we just learned something new from Aditya today. That was super cool. And I've learned a lot from students and from other people. So I love the, cozy atmosphere. It's great.
Greg, I think your slides are not public because it says we need access to it.
Oh,
so you might have to update the sharing. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. It's,
no worries. We got the link though, so.
Yeah, now it should be public. I hope it's the same link.
Yep.
And Rob, don't worry about missing the beginning because we're going to put this on the YouTube channel shortly.
Nice.
I got to jump off, you guys. I have another meeting. This was amazing. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Ankita. And Kai, I will see you in an hour. See everybody else.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
have a nice day. Bye-bye.